Welcome back, Honors. All right. So, welcome back to your first weekend flip since last weekend. All right. You can pretty much bet that we'll always have a flip on the weekends just so we can keep pace, right? Now, speaking of keeping pace, we are very, very on pace to be taking our next test around Thursday or Friday, okay? So we're going to be spending a lot of time reviewing those, so please don't freak out. A lot of the time is going to be spent reviewing on Green and White Day. We're going to do another big game, all right? We're going to play something new. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really, really excited about it, so I'll see you guys there, but let's get after it, all right? So something we need to go ahead and get into is all of this stuff following the classical period in Athens, right? When we left off, we were talking about the classical period in Athens, right? We were talking about the growth of Athens under Pericles, right? We were talking about his big boom culturally. We talked about his growth of theater and art and government, and all this stuff is off of the heels of the Persian Wars, right? That created this space for the Greeks to actually grow free of assault from a foreign entity. Now, the problem was getting into it, though. Sparta and Athens are kind of salty. Remember, at one point, Sparta sent 4,000 troops back to Athens saying, we don't want your help, right? So, and we also see how Athens is kind of being dicey because they're making statues of Athena out of ivory and gold that are worth $1.46 trillion off of money from the Delian League, right? Which is a little sketchy, right? Because remember we talked about that, right? The Delian League, all those members had to pay dues to actually stay in that military alliance, and bang, boom. So a lot of y'all probably immediately are like, when did we talk about that stuff? When we got into the philosophers, I take a lot of time to talk about their theories and talk about their ideas, right? This test is actually going to be the first one to have a writing section on it for you for this year, and it is going to be directly related to the philosophers, right? So you do need to be prepared for that. But also you need to remember, you need to jump back real quick and you probably should start casually studying the early Greek stuff. I'm going to be posting your study guide today, all right, on Google Classroom, so you can go ahead and get started on it, okay? So, but let's go ahead and get into it. So when we left off, Athens, Sparta hate each other, right? So when we left off, Athens, empire, growing, right? Pericles, expanding, trade sanctioning, I do this, you do that, you shut up, right? So he's got these big boats, he's got 200 triremes at his disposal, and he can basically enforce his will on just about anybody. Except Egypt. He can never take over Egypt. But still, the Peloponnesian War is going to break out, though, right? Mainly because of all this Athenian growth, right? So as Athens was growing, it starts stepping on a lot of these other little city-states' toes, right? Particularly ones places like Megara, right? So, and some of you are like, that's the girl from Hercules. No, it's an ancient Greek city-state, and also the girl from Hercules, all right? So Megara is a very, very good example, though, because they're a Spartan ally, right? And they refuse to actually adopt Athenian democracy. Well, they get into a trade war with each other because Athens refuses to allow people to go and trade with them without paying tribute to them through their waterways, right? Megara, of course, then immediately runs to Sparta, and Sparta's like, what the heck do you think you're doing? This is not what we do here in Greece. Waters are meant to be traded upon freely if they so choose. Look at Sparta being super diplomatic, right? And then Athens says, screw you, I don't want to play with you anymore, and then a war breaks out, right? So economics is what fuels this whole war, mainly because Athens was looking to try and grab up as much money as they possibly could, right? So a massive 27-year-long war is going to break out, right? When I first talked about the Peloponnesian War, I was 22, and now I'm older than the Peloponnesian War, which is gross. All right, so now, between Sparta and Athens, though, and it's mainly between their two groups. The Delian League has its allies, right? So the Delian League is Athens and its allies, the alliance they created following the Persian Wars, and they have a huge navy, right? Then you've got the Peloponnesian League, which is Sparta and its allies, and they have a huge land army, right? So you've got two groups that have the exact opposite of what the other one needs, right? So we have to talk really, really quickly, though, about strategy, right? So how do you use these two different types of militaries to actually prevent someone from winning? Well, Athens is going to use its navy and blockade Sparta, and Sparta is going to use its land army and blockade Athens, right? So something you need to know about what a blockade is, right? A blockade is actually when a group uses its forces to cut off another area from receiving supplies in or out, right? And you're basically starving them, okay? Well, ironically enough, when Athens went to starve Sparta, Sparta didn't really care because they didn't really trade with anybody in the first place, and they were pretty self-sufficient. And then when Sparta went to blockade Athens, Athens didn't really care because they had enough supplies to get them through tons and tons of time. So what ends up resulting in this entire thing is actually this thing called a stalemate, right? So a stalemate breaks out. I need you to add something to this here in a second, too. After a long stalemate, Sparta ends up winning. But it's only for 2 reasons that Sparta end up winning, all right? So, well, 3 if you really count it, but 2 big ones, all right? So Sparta ends up winning mainly because they borrowed Persia's naval fleet, right? Which is so dirty that they aligned with the Persians, which is Athens' main enemy, right? So they align with the Persians, they borrow their naval fleet, and then they take over, like, Athens using it. Also, Athens was really, really weak because, write this down, they got hit by a plague, right? The plague of Pericles, or the plague of Athens, that struck them in around, I think, 500 BC. All right, so give or take. Now, they end up killing 1 out of every 3 people in Athens. And who ends up dying? But Pericles. All right, so Pericles actually falls subject to the plague himself, and he ends up dying in that disease, right? So, and then also, of course, Socrates is now dead, so they don't have any really, really good leadership. And then not to mention another big reason is because Athens tried to do this stupid thing where they went to try and invade this place called Syracuse, right? Like, so there was this in like a little like a city-state on the island of Sicily called Syracuse, right? Like the city in New York. And it's where Sparta kept a lot of its food reserves, and it's also where they had a few allies in their Peloponnesian League with the one that they started, right? In opposition to the Delian League. Well, when the Athenians actually rolled up on the shores to try and take out their food stores, they all started unloading in the water, and Sparta knew they were coming before they ever actually even got off, and they massacred them in the water, which is actually brutal. Now, the conflict, though, here's the biggest thing, and you need to put a big star next to this. The Peloponnesian War is going to leave southern Greece, particularly the areas of Peloponnese, in absolute rubble, right? So it's just destroyed. Like, everything is knocked down. Yes, Sparta was victorious, but Sparta also suffered heavy losses, right? They had citizens that starved. They had a couple of helot revolts during the entire thing. It was a stalemate. I mean, like, a stalemate means that 2 people are just kind of knocking into each other and no one's really winning, all right? So a 27-year-long war that really just kind of cost a lot of lives. So all of Greece is just destroyed, which leaves room for Alexander the Great, right? So Alexander and the Hellenistic period. Alexander is one of my favorite people of all of history, so I can't wait to talk about him. He's a little bit of a weird dude. He's definitely like top 15. He's not like top 5, but he's up there, right? But he is going to usher in the last time period that we have to talk about, the Hellenistic period, right? The Peloponnesian War is the end of the classical period, right? So Mallory, go ahead and write that line right across, and now we're getting into like the dawn of the Hellenistic period. So the first stuff we got to talk about is still inside the classical period, but it's also in a very different place. So it's kind of like an asterisk of its own, right? So first thing you need to know about Alexander and his whole fam is the fact that he's not even Greek, all right? So he's actually Macedonian, all right? So Macedonian as in North Macedonia, a place on your map quiz. So is a mountainous region in Greece that's full of uncivilized people and frontier, right? So it's just full of stuff, right? It's like a Terry family reunion, all right? So just uncivilized people running around and playing bluegrass music, right? So just kidding. We're very civilized. Now, we do play bluegrass music, though. Now, Macedonia, though, this area was pretty much unaffected by the Peloponnesian War, leaving them to grow very strong very quickly, right? So Macedonia, as you can see right here to the north of Greece, is going to be led by the infamous king of Macedonia, Philip II, right? Alexander the Great's father, okay? So, something you need to also know about Philip is he's got a little bit of a messed up face. All right, so like Philip II was a phenomenal military general and also just one of the most unlucky people you'll ever meet in your entire life. All right, so now Philip II, as you can see, has a messed up eye. He lost it in a very, very long story that I will tell you on Green and White Day. Don't let me forget. Be like, why did Philip lose his eyeball? It's actually really, really insane. So anyway, but Philip II, right, king of Macedonia, seeks to change Macedonia and become the dominant Greek power following the Peloponnesian War. mainly just due to the fact that southern Greece is an absolute destruction zone, right? It's absolutely been crushed. So he knows that this is the time that he can actually organize his men and go and take the whole thing over, right? So now Philip uses his massive army that he recruits, all these uncivilized mountain people, right? He works them, trains them, equips them, and gets them ready to go fight after the Peloponnesian War, right? So he is a professional strategist, and he uses the phalanx system better than anybody has ever seen up to this point, right? Due to his sheer numbers, his massive size, and he also is very good at using the terrain around him to actually make a very, very effective battle system. Now, ironically enough, a lot of you are like, well, wait a minute. The Spartans used the phalanx too, and so did the Athenians. What makes this so special? His army hasn't been destroyed in a 27-year-long war, right? So he has a huge, huge advantage. And he is just slowly going to stomp through Greece, and he's going to use diplomacy, threats. He actually threatens Sparta, and they give up, right? So he tells Sparta, he's like, look, we'll come and destroy your whole thing, or I'll let you live if you just give up. And Sparta's like, all right, fine. So Sparta actually pays tribute to Philip and actually surrenders, and then he uses bribes to take over other large city-states and to create allies, right? So as he's growing and growing and growing, his military is also growing and growing and growing, and Athens and their ally Thebes becomes their main target, right? So in this whole process, Philip hires a very famous Athenian to tutor his son, right? Alexander III is directly tutored by Aristotle himself, right? So Aristotle becomes Alexander's teacher, and he begins to grow him into a genius of a young man, right? So when Alexander was about 18, after he had been tutored by Aristotle and after he continued to grow, and Aristotle's still with them at this point, him and his father defeat the leftover Delian League and Thebes, and Athens is going to surrender out of fear, right? So in a short few years, Philip II of Macedonia has successfully taken over the entire southern Greek region, right? And then he sets his sights on Persia, right? Philip actually sought to conquer Persia as well with Alexander at his side. But unfortunately, Philip is going to be stabbed to death at his daughter's wedding by one of his own bodyguards. And I'll tell you that whole story on White Day when I see you guys then. But we're going to go ahead and cut this one off here. I'm going to go ahead and post that study guide so y'all can get started on it. I wanted to keep this flip a little bit shorter just to help you guys out, all right? So, go Birds. I will see you guys on Monday or Tuesday. So, have a great weekend.